The night was so quiet that even the wind seemed afraid to move. A thin mist rolled over the highway, and somewhere in that pale silence came the screech of tires, then a dull, heavy thud. When the headlights cut through the fog, they caught the shape of something lying in the ditch. Not a deer, not a coyote. Its fur burned reddish under the light like a dying ember. At 2 a.m., the radio at Red Oak Sanctuary crackled to life. Possible red wolf hit by a vehicle. Mile 32. Highway 74. Dr. Emily Reed grabbed her medical kit before the sentence even finished. If that's truly a red wolf, she told her assistant Sam, it's one of the last of its kind. Their truck bounced through the fog-soaked road, the forest swallowing every beam of light. Emily's heart hammered against her chest, not from fear, but from the weight of what that call might mean. For decades she'd read reports about the collapse of red wolf populations. Fewer than 30 remained in the wild. Losing even one was unthinkable. When they arrived, the air smelled of metal and rain. The wolf lay on the roadside, its hind leg twisted, breath shallow but steady. Age had frosted the fur around its muzzle, but the eyes, those amber-burning eyes, still held the wilderness itself. Emily knelt beside the animal, speaking softly. "You're not alone. Not tonight." Sam adjusted the flashlight. Nora, another volunteer, unfolded the stretcher. A tranquilizer dart hissed, followed by a moment of stillness, then the faint rhythm of a heartbeat monitor. They worked in silence, knowing that each second could be the difference between extinction and survival. Back at the clinic, fluorescent lights flickered over blood-matted fur. Emily's gloves were soaked, her hands trembling only when she finally paused. "Compound fracture, possible internal bleeding," she murmured. "But he's fighting." As dawn crept through the blinds, the old wolf began to breathe more evenly. Emily placed her palm near its chest, feeling the fragile thump beneath layers of gauze. "We'll call him Rufus," she whispered. "It means red and lucky." Outside, the first light touched the pine trees, painting them gold. The sound of a distant howl echoed through the forest, lonely, uncertain, almost a call to remember. The narrator's voice returns low and haunting. "Knew it then, but this single rescue would test every boundary between human compassion and wild instinct. What happened next would leave everyone speechless." The Red Oak Sanctuary sits deep in the lowland forests of eastern North Carolina, a mosaic of pine cypress and quiet marshland. To outsiders, it's just another remote outpost, but to those who work there, it's a front line. A place where extinction is not a theory, but a patient lying on a metal table. The facility was small, 3 prefab buildings, a fenced enclosure, and a medical wing that smelled faintly of iodine and pine resin. At its heart worked Dr. Emily Reed, 32, wildlife veterinarian and lead medical coordinator for the state's Red Wolf Recovery Program. Emily wasn't born into wilderness. She grew up in Atlanta, surrounded by concrete and the hum of traffic. But a field trip to Yellowstone at age 10 changed her life. Watching a gray wolf move through falling snow, she realized what most people never did, that wildness was fragile, and once gone, it never returns. After graduating from Cornell's College of Veterinary Medicine, Emily worked briefly in Florida, treating sea turtles and pelicans. But something about the red wolf's story, the only wolf species native to the southeastern United States, hunted to the edge of extinction, called to her. In 2022, she joined the federal program under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service (FWS). Her colleagues used to joke that Emily didn't talk to people, she talked to patients. Her bond with animals was quiet, instinctive. She could read stress in a heartbeat, fear in the flick of an ear. For now, he slept a shadow of what he once was. His heartbeat, once strong and wild, now depended on machines and human mercy. Emily watched the monitor flash 68 beats per minute, then 70. Steady, but weak. She took notes, recorded vital signs, and adjusted his bandages. Sam entered with fresh saline packs. "Do you really think he'll make it?" he asked quietly. Emily didn't look up. "He has to," she said. "There are so few left." Outside, Nora was preparing a separate enclosure. Fresh hay, reinforced fencing, a small infrared camera for night monitoring. Everything had to be ready if Rufus survived the first 72 hours. The sanctuary was silent except for the rustle of leaves and the distant croak of frogs. It felt like time had slowed, as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting to see whether this old wolf would rise again. Emily leaned against the window frame, exhaustion clouding her eyes. Sometimes she whispered, "I wonder if we're trying to hold back the tide with our bare hands." For the next 48 hours, every minute felt borrowed. The old red wolf Rufus lay on a padded recovery table wrapped in bandages and faint light. His breath was uneven, sometimes breaking into shallow gasps that made the monitors flicker in alarm. Emily barely left his side. A mug of cold coffee sat untouched beside a stack of medical charts. She noted his vitals every hour, speaking softly as she worked words meant more for herself than for him. "You've made it this far, old boy. Don't give up now." Outside the clinic, rain hammered the tin roof. Sam and Nora moved quietly through the corridor, carrying towels, setting up heat lamps. The smell of wet earth mixed with disinfectant. They all knew the first 72 hours would decide everything. By the third morning, a faint movement, a twitch of Rufus's paw, sent a shock through the room. Emily froze, heart thundering. Then another movement. His amber eyes opened cloudy but alert. For a second, they locked onto hers, ancient, feral, searching. She exhaled, whispering, "Welcome back." Days turned into a rhythm of care and caution. The team moved around Rufus with quiet respect. Sometimes when the clinic went silent at night, he would lift his head and stare at the trees beyond the window, as if he could still hear the forest calling him home. Emily often caught herself watching him too long. There was something magnetic in that stare, something that reminded her of why she'd chosen this life. It wasn't about saving animals. It was about saving the idea of wild. But with progress came tension. A call from the state wildlife office reminded Emily of the rules: no imprinting, no emotional dependency. Red wolves were to be prepared for release, not companionship. When she hung up, she sat in silence, staring at the paperwork on her desk. "How do you heal something without caring for it?" she murmured. Sam glanced up. "Maybe that's what makes you good at this. You care anyway." Later that evening, as Emily cleaned the wound, Rufus's paw brushed against her arm. Reflex or trust, she couldn't tell. For the first time, his body relaxed under her touch. His breathing slowed. She whispered, "You're tougher than all of us, aren't you?" From that night on, Rufus began to eat on his own. Each meal brought a little more strength. He explored the corners of the enclosure, sniffing the air, tail flicking in cautious curiosity. His instincts, long suppressed by pain and sedation, were returning. With recovery came questions none of them were ready to face. What would happen when he was strong enough to leave? Would he remember the wild or the humans who saved him? For Emily, the thought of letting him go felt both necessary and unbearable. She'd seen hundreds of rescues, but never one that carried so much history, so much meaning. Rufus wasn't just a wolf, he was a living echo of an entire species struggling to exist. That night, as she recorded her notes, she wrote a single line at the bottom of the page. "If he survives, maybe the red wolves still have a chance." By the fourth week, the air around Red Oak Sanctuary had changed. What began as the anxious hum of emergency care was slowly giving way to something calmer, an unspoken rhythm between humans and wolf. Rufus, the old red wolf, no longer needed sedation or constant monitoring. His wounds had sealed, leaving thin white scars across his flank. The fracture had mended enough for him to walk, though he moved with a slow, deliberate gait, each step an act of quiet defiance against the odds that had almost claimed his life. Every morning, Emily arrived before sunrise. She'd walk past the dew-glazed fence, clipboard in hand, whispering to herself the day's tasks. Temperature check, mobility test, feed at 7:15. It was routine, clinical, professional, but inside it had become something deeply personal. Through the narrow mesh, Rufus watched her every move. His amber eyes no longer held panic. They were calm now, aware, calculating. He had accepted the rhythm too. Over the following weeks, small victories turned into milestones. Rufus began to howl at night, low and resonant. Sometimes the wolves in the distant breeding compound answered back a haunting chorus, drifting through the Carolina pines. Each howl reminded Emily of what waited beyond these fences: freedom, danger, uncertainty. But also belonging. One evening, she stayed late after the others had gone. The moon hung full above the tree line, the night air thick with summer humidity. Rufus paced slowly, restless. She sat near the fence legs crossed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You miss them, don't you?" For a long time he didn't move. Then he lifted his head and howled, not to her, but through her, as if the sound itself was a bridge between two worlds. Emily felt it vibrate through her ribs. It was beautiful and lonely at once. She closed her eyes and let the sound fill the dark. Moments like these defined their bond, not affection, but trust. A silent understanding born from endurance. Emily never forgot that Rufus wasn't hers to keep. Yet somewhere deep down, she also knew that part of her would never belong entirely to the human world again. As the weeks turned into months, Rufus grew stronger. His muscles filled out, his coat thickened to a healthy sheen. Sam often joked, "He looks more like a ghost king now than a patient." One morning, while checking the enclosure cameras, Nora gasped. "Look at this," she said. On the screen, Rufus was stalking a squirrel that had wandered too close to the fence, silent, precise, every movement fluid and wild. It lasted only seconds, but to Emily, it was everything she'd hoped to see. "He's remembering who he is," she whispered. It was their small miracle proof that even when nature fights back, survival is still possible. Later that week, an inspection team from the Fish and Wildlife Service arrived. They measured Rufus's progress, reviewed his medical files, and checked the enclosure's compliance. One officer nodded approvingly. "He's nearly ready for pre-release evaluation." Emily's heart leapt and then sank. Ready for release meant he would soon be gone. That night, she stood outside his pen watching him sleep. His chest rose and fell in rhythm with the forest sounds beyond the walls. She whispered, "You were never meant to stay. I just hope the world is ready for you again." By early summer, the sanctuary felt alive again. Fireflies glittered above the grass at dusk, and cicadas hummed through the heat. Rufus was almost ready. His gait had steadied. His fur gleamed bronze red under sunlight. Emily's team had begun pre-release drills, limited exposure to hunting scents, distant playback of wolf calls, and reduced human contact. Each day pushed Rufus one step closer to freedom and one step further from Emily. That Friday began like any other. The morning report showed stable vitals. Sam fixed the outer fence. Nora logged camera data. The sky was clear, impossibly blue. No one suspected what was coming. By noon, dark clouds rolled in from the Atlantic. Stormwatch just went red, Sam called, scanning his phone. "They say it's building faster than expected." Emily frowned. "Let's secure the medical wing and lock the outer enclosures." Within an hour, rain hit like glass. Winds screamed through the pine line, bending trees sideways. The power flickered once, then died. Emergency lights glowed faint amber. Inside the clinic, monitors beeped on backup battery. Rufus paced restlessly in his pen, muscles tensing at every crack of thunder. "He doesn't like confined storms," Nora shouted over the roar. "None of us do," Emily replied, tying her hair back. She checked the generator still running, but unstable. Lightning split the sky outside, followed by a crash so loud it shook the windows. Then came the sound no one wanted to hear, metal twisting. The east fence. Sam yelled, grabbing a flashlight. Emily followed him into the wind. Rain blinded them, whipping sideways. In the dim light, she saw part of the perimeter fence collapse under a fallen tree. If the breach spread, the storm could destroy the rehabilitation cages, including Rufus's. "Grab the hydraulic cutters," she shouted. They fought through knee-deep water toward the enclosure. Branches tore at their clothes. Rufus was howling now, a deep, panicked sound that pierced the storm. When they reached the gate, Emily's stomach dropped. The inner latch had jammed from debris. Water was rising fast, almost a foot inside. Rufus pressed against the corner, snarling at the flood. "He'll drown if we don't open it," Nora cried. Emily's voice was steady but shaking. "Stand back. I'm going in." Emily. "No, you can't." But she already had the tranquilizer pole slung over her shoulder. The gate creaked open just enough for her to squeeze inside. The rain stung like needles. Rufus turned growling eyes wild. "It's me," she said, voice barely audible. "It's okay." She waded through water up to her knees, flashlight beam shaking. The wolf backed away, trapped between fear and instinct. A flash of lightning illuminated the scene. Emily drenched, one arm outstretched, and Rufus, his fur slick and dark teeth bared but trembling. "Listen," she whispered. "I'm not your enemy. I'm your way out." For a second time, froze. Then Rufus lunged not at her, but past her toward the rising current. His paw hit the bent gatepost, dislodging it just enough to swing free. The surge of water spilled outward, lowering the level inside. Emily gasped. "You clever, stubborn thing!" Sam and Nora rushed forward, securing ropes and cutting away debris. Together they cleared the fallen branches, guiding Rufus toward the dry section of the compound. When the last gate slammed shut behind them, everyone collapsed in the mud, panting. Rain still poured, but the danger had passed. Rufus stood on higher ground, chest-heaving fur matted to his frame. His eyes found Emily through the storm. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The wild and the human, both drenched and breathing as one. Then slowly, Rufus stepped forward and pressed his muzzle briefly against the fence. A gesture not of taming, but of recognition. That night, the sanctuary was a ruin of broken branches and waterlogged soil. But somehow, every animal survived. And for Emily, it wasn't just survival, it was revelation. It was nature's reminder that he was never truly theirs. The night before his transfer, Emily walked the perimeter alone. The moon hung pale and quiet above the trees. Rufus watched her from the shadows, silent. She whispered, "Tomorrow you'll be free. Just promise me you'll survive." He tilted his head as if listening. Then, almost imperceptibly, he howled once, low, brief, a farewell, without words. Emily closed her eyes. Goodbye, old friend. In that storm, they had both crossed a line from fear to trust, from captivity to readiness. The flood had washed away the boundary between healer and healed. Now, only one step remained. The wild had called him back. And for the first time Emily was ready to answer. A week after the storm, the sun returned warm, sharp, indifferent. The sanctuary was almost back to normal, but inside the staff house, tension hung thick. The release of Rufus had been approved, yet not everyone agreed with the decision. For Emily, it felt like a quiet countdown. Each sunrise brought her closer to losing the animal she'd fought to save. For the rest of the staff, it was more complicated. Outside forces had begun to close in. The first letter came from a nearby landowner. "If you people release wolves here, you'll regret it. They'll attack our cattle." Then came the second, a formal notice from the State Wildlife Compliance Office demanding a reassessment of Rufus's behavioral readiness. The storm footage showing Emily inside the enclosure had circulated through official channels. Regulations were clear: any human contact beyond minimal medical care risked behavioral imprinting. Inside the meeting room, Officer Daniels placed the report on the table. His tone was measured but firm. "Dr. Reed, you entered a containment zone during an active storm. That's a violation of Section 7, Paragraph C." Emily kept her voice steady. "If I hadn't, he would have drowned." "I'm not disputing your intent," Daniels said, "but protocol exists for a reason. These wolves can't associate safety with humans. It compromises reintroduction." Sam leaned forward. "She saved his life. Isn't that the point of all this?" Daniels sighed. "Intentions don't change biology." For a long moment, the room was silent except for the ticking clock. Then Daniels closed the file. "The board will review the footage. Until then, Rufus's release is on hold." Outside, the world was no kinder. News spread fast. Controversy at wolf sanctuary. Human wolf. Contact sparks. Investigation. Comments flooded social media. Some praised her bravery. Others called her reckless. Leave nature alone. Wolves don't need rescuing, they need distance. For the first time, Emily felt the invisible weight of the public pressing down. Every decision dissected, every act of compassion questioned. That night she sat alone in the clinic. The fluorescent light hummed faintly above. Rufus lay on the far side of the fence watching her in silence. His eyes were steady, untroubled by human politics. She whispered, "They think I made you weak, but they don't see you. Not really." He blinked once, slow and deliberate, then turned away to face the forest. It was over, or so they thought. That evening, Sam found Emily sitting by the fence, her clothes still dusty from the day's inspection. The forest glowed gold in the setting sun. Rufus was lying nearby, head resting on his paws, calm and unbothered. Sam sat beside her. "You gonna fight it?" She stared straight ahead. "No, I just have to trust he'll make it." He nodded slowly. "He will." For a while, they just listened, the wind in the pine needles, the hum of distant insects, the slow rhythm of two beings who understood each other beyond words. Then Nora appeared at the door. "Emily." They called from headquarters. "They've approved the release again, but the relocation team takes over in the morning." Emily exhaled, almost smiling. "So that's it then." In the stillness that followed, she realized the fight had never been about rules or credit. It was about balance between love and letting go, between protection and freedom. Rufus had never belonged to her. He belonged to the wind, the mud, the silent spaces between trees. She stood brushing the dirt from her hands. "Let's make tomorrow count." Shot suggestion. Wide shot, twilight settling over the sanctuary. Emily's silhouette beside Rufus's pen, two shapes framed in the dying light. The next morning came with a sky painted in silver mist. The relocation truck rumbled into the driveway doors, marked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service logo. The team moved with efficiency, tranquilizer darts prepared carriers, secured protocols, followed to the letter. Emily watched from a distance. She wasn't allowed inside the perimeter anymore, but Rufus knew. The moment he sensed the change in air, he turned toward her direction. The dart hissed a soft click, and his body eased into stillness. As they loaded him into the transport crate, Emily whispered, "Run far, live long." No one heard her but the forest. That day, regulations won the battle, but not the story. For even as bureaucracy moved him away, Rufus had already crossed a boundary no law could reach. He had taught them all something that couldn't be written into policy. Compassion isn't a weakness. It's the wildest thing we have left. The dawn of the release day came soft and gray. Fog clung to the trees, wrapping the sanctuary in a veil of quiet stillness. For the first time in months, Emily wasn't wearing her white coat. She stood near the truck in a plain jacket, hands buried deep in her pockets, heart heavy with something between pride and loss. The relocation team moved briskly, checking straps and data tags. The FWS insignia gleamed on their uniforms, official and distant. Rufus lay calm in the transport crate, sedated but steady. His breath fogged the air in rhythmic bursts. The tranquilizer had dulled his senses, but not his presence. Even asleep, he carried the weight of the wild. Emily stepped closer. "Can I have a minute?" The lead officer hesitated, then nodded. "Make it brief." She knelt beside the crate, her fingers tracing the cold metal bars. Through the narrow slit, she could see the faint rise and fall of Rufus's chest. "You did it," she whispered. "You came back from the edge. Now you get to go home." Her reflection shimmered on the crate's surface, two survivors mirrored in steel. As the engine roared to life, the sanctuary faded behind them, the place that had been both battlefield and home. The road stretched endlessly through a landscape of flooded meadows and whispering reeds. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of storms. Hours later, they arrived at the release zone. The land was wild and untamed, a sea of long grass and shallow pools reflecting the sky. Egrets lifted off in the distance. The sound of frogs pulsed through the air. "This is it," Daniel said, checking his GPS. "Grid Sector 12, coordinates confirmed." The team moved quietly. The crate was lowered to the ground door facing east, where the morning light broke through the clouds. Emily crouched beside it. Her heart pounded. She wanted to say 100 things, but only one sentence formed. "Whatever happens next, you're free." She pulled the lever. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the door creaked open, and Rufus stepped out, slow, deliberate, regal. The wind caught his fur, scattering droplets of dew like sparks of gold. His nose lifted to the air, tasting the scent of pine and water. He turned once, scanning the humans who stood still behind him. His eyes met Emily's, calm, certain. No fear, only recognition. She whispered, "Go on." He took a step forward, then another. And then, with a final glance, he broke into a run, silent, powerful, a streak of red vanishing into the tall grass. The sound of his paws faded until all that remained was the rustle of wind and the distant call of another wolf somewhere beyond the tree line. Emily exhaled shakily, tears blurring her vision. Sam placed a hand on her shoulder. Nora smiled through tears. Daniels lowered his camera, his voice soft. That was perfect. But even as he disappeared, his presence lingered in the air, in the rippling grass, in the heartbeat of everyone who had witnessed the moment. Emily stood there long after the others packed up. The wind brushed against her hair, carrying faint echoes from deep within the refuge. A howl, low, drawn out, unmistakably his. She smiled. "Thank you." The camera lingers on her face as the sound fades, replaced by the gentle hum of the forest, returning to calm. Hours later, back at the sanctuary, she entered the empty enclosure. The ground was dry now, the scent of Rufus still faint in the air. His feeding bowl, the patch of hay he once favored, all untouched. She sat down in the corner, running her hand along the wire fence. "You left a hole here," she whispered, "but that's how it's supposed to be." The weeks that followed were both empty and full. Without Rufus, the sanctuary felt quieter, but not silent. There was purpose in the air again. Emily threw herself into field reports, genetic tracking, and outreach programs. Every number she logged, every new pup born in the wild, felt like a ripple from his story. Then, one morning, a field camera from the Alligator River site sent back an image. A single red wolf, older unmistakable, standing on a riverbank under dawn light. Beside him, smaller figures, 2 pups, their fur pale and bright. Emily froze, staring at the screen. Her hand trembled. Sam leaned over her shoulder. "Is that?" She nodded, voice breaking into a smile. "It's him. It's Rufus." He had not just survived. He had reclaimed his place, father-leader symbol of hope. Emily printed the photo and pinned it to the sanctuary wall, beneath the handwritten note from months ago: "If he survives, maybe the red wolves still have a chance." Now, there was no if. Autumn came quietly to North Carolina. The air grew thin and cool, and the forests around Red Oak turned crimson and gold. In the mornings, mist curled between the trees, like memory refusing to fade. It had been 3 months since Rufus returned to the wild. 3 months since Emily had last seen those amber eyes. And yet somehow he was everywhere, in the echo of a howl at dusk, in the paw prints by the sanctuary's edge, in the rustle of pine needles beneath her boots. The sanctuary had changed too. Repairs were complete. New animals had arrived: an injured hawk, a fox with a broken paw, 2 orphaned wolf pups transferred from another site. Life had resumed its rhythm. But to Emily, everything carried a new kind of weight, a deeper purpose. For Emily, the work no longer felt like fighting extinction. It felt like nurturing resilience, a constant reminder that the line between survival and loss was thinner than ever, and every choice mattered. Once a week, she visited the Alligator River Refuge for monitoring duty. The landscape there always took her breath away, miles of silent marshland, broken only by the rippling song of wind through grass. On one of those visits, just as the sun began to sink, she heard it, a distant howl, low and familiar. Her heart froze. She turned toward the sound. Through her binoculars, a flash of movement, a red silhouette against the reeds. And then another smaller one beside it. She smiled. "You kept your promise." For a long while she just stood there, letting the cold air sting her cheeks, the call fading slowly into twilight. The sanctuary's success with Rufus brought new attention. Local news covered the story, environmental groups offered grants, and schools requested tours. The wolf that returned home, they called him. Emily began giving talks at community centers, showing photos, and explaining the fragile recovery of the red wolf population. She spoke not as a hero, but as a witness. "These animals don't need our pity," she told one audience. "They need our respect. We save them not because they're helpless, but because we owe them the space to exist." Her words carried across classrooms and conference halls, weaving science with empathy. Kids listened, wide-eyed teachers wiped their eyes, and for once the word wolf no longer meant fear, it meant hope. Some stories don't end where you expect them to. They echo through places, through people, through every life touched along the way. Rufus's return was proof of that echo, a reminder that what we heal heals us in return. Rufus had returned to the wild, but his story had rooted itself in every heart that heard it. In a world that often forgot how to listen, one wolf had taught humanity to do just that, to pause, to protect, to remember. The final shot drifts upward, the sanctuary small beneath the vast Carolina sky. A single red wolf runs along the tree line, blending into sunlight, disappearing just as the screen fades to white. Some stories are measured not in days or months, but in the ripples they create. Rufus's journey from the roadside to the heart of the wild was one such story, a testament to survival, trust, and the fragile beauty of life. At Red Oak Sanctuary, every volunteer, every veterinarian, every late-night shift mattered. Each careful stitch, each measured dose, each whispered word contributed to one undeniable truth. Even the smallest act can shape the future of an entire species. The red wolf is more than just an animal. It is a symbol of resilience of ecosystems held together by the quiet persistence of life. With fewer than 30 wolves remaining in the wild at any given time, every individual carries a weight far beyond itself. Rufus's story illustrates a delicate balance, the line between intervention and independence, compassion and respect. Emily learned, as all caretakers do, that love is not possession. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give is freedom, the right to live, to roam, to be wild. And yet, freedom comes with responsibility. Protecting the red wolf means protecting their habitat, educating communities, and adhering to strict guidelines that ensure their survival. Human interference, no matter how well-intentioned, must always be measured against the needs of the wild. For those watching, the lesson is simple but profound. Every effort to rescue, to rehabilitate, to conserve counts. Each life saved is a thread in the tapestry of nature, fragile yet enduring. Rufus survived not just because of skill, but because of empathy, dedication, and careful adherence to conservation principles. This story does not end with one wolf's freedom. It continues in every action taken to protect these creatures, in every volunteer who steps into the cold before dawn, in every child who learns to appreciate the wild rather than fear it. And for Emily, the lesson is as clear as Rufus's amber eyes. Success is measured not in control, but in the trust we cultivate. By helping Rufus survive and return to the wild, she became part of a larger story, one where hope is tangible, where life persists even against staggering odds. Rufus ran free, as all wild wolves are meant to. Yet his story remains with us, a heartbeat that echoes in every tree, every creek, and every human heart willing to listen.